We're live. It's the DFL Before DNF podcast with me, Josh, from Borderlands. Today, I think I say this every time, but I think it's because I just genuinely love talking to people. A, genuinely love talking to people. B, love talking ultra running. And then C, love when I see like people's life intersect with ultra running. And so it takes us to a deeper, more interesting place. And all of this is really for in my pursuit of wisdom of how to survive the late race. And so today I've got Alex Horn. He's an old buddy. Long before we were ultra running friends, we were just friends who both ran and kind of got excited about the sport. He moved to Salt Lake City and as I believe active duty in the Air Force, but was taking some time to get his PhD in evolutionary biology while also flying C-17s on the side, which was kind of his main gig, but somehow ended up studying evolutionary biology, moved on to working now for or with the Department of Defense, but still flying and also still finding time to train for the 100-mile race at Zion to run with me, which I'm beyond excited about. And so today we're going to talk about a wide scope of things, but all of those things are going to ultimately point us to the person of Alex, but really our topic of how do we as humans, how have we evolved over the years? How have we transformed over the years to be able to handle the 100-mile distance? And perhaps the better question is what happened to us? Why did we stop being able to handle such crazy endurance? And now some of us crazy people are trying to kind of bring it back in a society that is maybe not as hospitable to our endurance efforts. So before we go any further, I want to welcome my buddy, Alex. Hey, Alex.
Hey, thanks for having me on. This is fun.
Yeah, man. Where are you right now?
So living here in Menlo Park right now, which actually is pretty close to trail running Mecca. So every once in a while I get up to Marin County and get to run all the trails up by
the
Golden
headlands.
Gate. Yeah, the headlands. So that's my treat to myself, maybe once a month as I get to go up there. But otherwise, plenty of fun running out here and great weather.
Nice.
So it's a good place to hang out for a couple of years.
That's cool. And so specifically, I mean, we've talked about a wide range. We talked about the PhD thing, the pilot thing, and the Department of Defense thing. You're there. Why are you there?
Currently in Menlo Park right now, working for a Department of Defense unit called the Defense Innovation Unit. Okay. And I'm there on behalf of the Air Force. So yeah, you're right. I'm still active duty Air Force, fly C-17s, but that's kind of a side job at this point. Most of my efforts now are working with this Defense Innovation Unit, which is headquartered right here in Silicon Valley. And the whole point of the organization is to scale commercial technology across the Department of Defense. And then I'm focusing that on Air Force aviation type use cases for various commercial technology, which has been a very, very fun, engaging job for the past couple of years.
Okay, so that sounds like full-time work. When you say C-17 pilot on the side, what does that mean? You're still occasionally up in the air flying those beasts?
Yeah, so the agreement, the Air Force let me go play down here doing this Department of Defense job under the agreement that I would still maintain my flying qualifications and occasionally go fly missions. So Travis Air Force Base is right up the road near Sacramento. So when it's probably about a couple times a month, I'll head up there and fly a training mission, or, just the other week I was in Australia. So every once in a while I get pulled to go do operational stuff as well, which is a nice break from the flying the desk,
Innovation,
as we call it. Yeah, exactly.
So and the C in C-17 stands for cargo. So you're not flying fighter stuff. You don't have artillery. I don't even know the words. You don't have machine guns.
Yeah, we're not dropping bombs or anything like that. Every once in a while, we'll carry bombs to different places. But generally speaking, flying cargo, people, toilet paper, bottles of water, and whatever, all over the world. So I've got
100% of the time on behalf of the military.
The U.S. Air Force. Yep. Currently, military cargo transport is what big gray airplane with a big old cargo compartment that we throw a bunch of junk in the back.
And so there's a C-17, and then there's like another one that has maybe 3 numbers in it. right?
Yeah, there's a C-130.
Yeah.
That's
So
the
what's
little
the
guy.
difference?
That's a C-130 is like a smaller plane that, the terminology is that's tactical airlift, usually
Okay.
smaller, shorter distances, smaller cargo loads. Then there's the C-5, which is like the big behemoth
Oh,
that's
that's the
like twice,
behemoth. Okay.
yeah, that's like twice the size of a C-17.
Oh,
C-17 is
dang.
like this like hybrid kind of in the middle that jack of all trades, and because of that, we're the busiest. I think the busiest pilots in the Air Force.
Hmm.
Really nonstop. Some of
There's just
my
constant
buddies are like,
utility.
that's right. Yeah, I mean it's they'll send us to go do the strategic like moving stuff across the world, but then they'll
Whoa.
also ask us to go fly into dirt airfields and in the middle of the desert and stuff like that. So it's been fun to do, but I've started shifting into like the academic world, which we'll talk about, and then also
Yeah.
this like innovation space to kind of get away from being gone so much
Even
with the
though
family and all that
we've been
stuff.
friends for a while, I'm actually excited to find the thread that ties all of these things together that you do, because for me, like, oftentimes people see what all I've done entrepreneurially and they're like, oh, you just can't stay focused on one single thing. But if we chat for a little bit, I can say, no, here's the thread that ties food and beverage and real estate
Yeah.
investment and trail running. Like, and teaching entrepreneurship. I'm interested. I don't know what your thread is that ties.
If you could do that service for me and help me find that thread here, that would be fantastic. Because I
Actually,
frankly
okay,
don't know myself. But yeah,
game on. I actually,
yeah,
I love that. Okay,
that's
so
great.
you're flying C-17s. You're maybe in Seattle, and then you're looking to get a PhD in evolutionary biology. Is that right? Were you Seattle before coming to Salt Lake City?
Correct. Yeah. So there's a big base up there, C-17 base in Tacoma, actually, just south of
Okay.
Seattle. And yeah, I got the opportunity through an Air Force Academy teaching gig. So I'm an Air Force Academy grad, and I talked with my department back there, and they said they'd pick me up to teach. And that was another way of like, oh, great, if I can find a way to not be gone 300 days a year from my family, I'll go do that. So
Mm,
that was kind of the impetus for the grad school thing. And then we picked Salt Lake City because it's awesome. And
yeah.
uh,
Yeah. Good job.
in-laws were there, which you guys know, Ken and Sandy.
Yeah.
So went there, University of Utah, and really got kind of funneled into the evolutionary biology program, mainly just because I picked Utah and they've got a good evolutionary biology program, and also the Air Force Academy thing.
So did you start with Salt Lake City and then look for something at the U that would be interesting, or were you already thinking evolutionary biology?
Well, it needed to be some form of biology because
Mm,
I was going to go back and teach biology,
that's what the academy
and so
wanted you to teach.
exactly, yeah.
Got
So
it.
there were a couple other schools I was curious about, but really we wanted Salt Lake, so showed up at the U.
All right. So this is a fun connection to ultra running. So you get into a lab, and I'm going to get the words wrong. You're in a lab, maybe of a guy that's
Yeah,
was
sure.
mentioned in Born to Run, correct?
Yeah, actually, pretty big collaborator on Born to Run. Him and his brother. So his name's Dr. David Carrier. I ended up being in his lab,
Okay.
and that was his. You know, you kind of show up to a grad degree program, and there's dozens of labs sometimes, and
Yeah.
they kind of bounce your name around. And it was Dave Carrier saw my resume or whatever. It was like, oh, that guy sounds kind of weird. Sure, let's bring him in. And so he focuses on, it's called functional morphology, um, of like the human body and human evolution, musculoskeletal structures, things like that. And so I think his big contribution to Born to Run was the morphology of the human foot and the evolution of
Mm.
like being kind of more flat footed compared to all of our mammalian brothers and sisters, and the idea that was in part at least for moving across very long distances.
Okay, I'm doing my best here. Morphology, does that mean like changing? Like how the foot has
That
changed?
means kind of shape. It's like the diff like the morphology of the foot would be the way this bones are constructed
Okay.
in terms of like its actual shape. Like think about like a cat's morphology is they're basically running on their toes and pads of their feet, and their heel is like way up in the air. Whereas
Okay.
our bones shifted to be just, kind of flat on the ground, which,
Okay.
that's all morphology.
Okay. I was doing my best with the word because the only time I'd ever heard that word was Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, and I didn't know if that meant to change or
To
what.
change,
So
yeah,
I'm doing my best. Okay.
it's a good
So you're
reference.
in this really cool scenario. I mean, for those my let's say generation of ultra runners coming in 2012, 2013 was completely about Born to Run.
Hmm.
Even the great runners of the time would name, that book and what was happening at that time. That book was so
Yeah.
formational in growing the industry. Now the industry is growing 17, 18% year over year. But the boom, the hockey stick was that book. So you're in Dr. Carrier's lab. He's working on foot morphology, contributing to Chris McDougall's book. And now you enter in, and what do you study? What do you start chasing
Yeah.
in
So
such an iconic lab?
yeah, nothing having to do with running, unfortunately. So, frankly, I really didn't even know much about his contributions there. He's
Probably
kind of
made it
famous
easier because,
for,
like, I bet if you
yeah,
had the ambition, like, I'm going to get in Dave Carrier's lab, like, no chance. But like that, you wandered
that's
into
probably
it has
right.
actually
Yeah,
probably made it more doable.
that's exactly right. Yeah, and I mean, I showed up and I was in a weird situation where the Air Force was basically fully funding my program, meaning I
Mm-hmm.
don't have to be like a research assistant or a teacher's assistant. So he just basically sat me down and was like, well, what do you want to study? You can basically study anything. Here are
Wow.
some things that I focus on. And the one that really piqued my interest was his interest in aggression, human aggression,
Mm.
and kind of this unique nature and behavior, really. So the unique nature of humans, that we're kind of one of the few species, really only maybe three total in the entire animal kingdom, that do this intraspecies aggression. So
Mm-hmm.
human on human violence, like just big deal human on human
Mm.
violence, and we've done that for a really really long time, we
Yeah.
think. So chimpanzees do it a little bit, lions do it a little bit, but generally speaking, most of the violence in the animal kingdom is, interspecies, so predation and different things like that.
Mm.
So I find that to be really fascinating because I think it leads to a lot of the problems we experience in modern society. So I was like, well, that sounds like a fun thing to get to understand a little bit better, is why are we so aggressive towards
So
our own?
in your research, so that's very, that's a big picture, and I'm maybe even going to reduce it to even more simple. You're trying to find where that comes from.
Yeah, just trying to understand it from an evolutionary lens, basically.
Mm.
And then so that's where things kind of kicked off, and I spent some time focusing my coursework on that, and then just meeting with Dave Carrier from time to time to kind of talk through things. He recommended some books, and then I kind of stumbled into this very interesting field of endocrinology research, so neuroendocrinology, focused around the hormone oxytocin. And I got there because oxytocin seems to be involved in a lot of this behavior, not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily the aggression side of the house, but the bonding. So the term that I think Dave may have coined the term, but there, or one of his colleagues, but this idea of coalitional um, aggression within a species. So you
Uh-huh.
form a coalition and you go out as a group of, mostly generally males will form
Okay.
this coalition, go out as a group, and attack some other group. And that's really actually, and I should correct myself, that's really the unique thing that humans do that other species don't do. Is, every once in a while you'll have these like individual aggressive acts, but
Sure.
we're the one of the few ones that will get together as a pack and then go out and attack other packs again, like wolves, lions, a couple others. But so anyway, so that's where oxytocin got kind of into the mix.
Can you do a brief explanation of oxytocin?
Yeah, so it's a very, well, it's a pretty old neuropeptide molecule,
Okay.
which is released from it's basically the command center of the brain. At the very middle of your brain is the hypothalamus.
Okay.
There's a lot of old ancient neurons and pathways that are in that part of the brain that regulate a lot of things, like things like the body clock, the circadian rhythms, and stuff like that.
Mm.
But so oxytocin kind of lives there and is pumped into a gland called the pituitary gland, which is just beneath the hypothalamus, and that's the main like signal out to the rest of the body. So it gets pumped out to the rest of the body and does all these interesting things. Oxytocin is famously known for milk letdown in women. So that's like the thing that allows women or mammals, mammalian females, to lactate, which is super interesting. But when I started studying it, realizing that, wow, it does a lot more than that too. Oh, I mean, also like contractions, uterine contractions, stuff like that. But it does a lot more than that, and is very, is actually necessary. We found they've done these fascinating studies where they can actually remove oxytocin neurons from a rat's brain, basically, and they find that it is incapable of bonding with
Oh my goodness.
anyone within their species. It just basically cannot. Well, yeah, it has a very difficult time doing any sort of bonding behaviors. And
wow.
So that was kind of what really drew me into that. Is I was like, wow, that's fascinating that this hormone that has all these like interesting physical effects of milk letdown and contractions and whatever is also necessary for.
So then am I understanding correctly that oxytocin is a hallmark of bonding?
Correct. Yep. Absolutely.
Okay.
And then of a lot of the things that we think of as like good things, good emotions, like it's an anxiolytic, it's called, so lowers anxiety. It's an analgesic, meaning it's like a pain reliever. So you think about like
interesting
when it's pumping, when Becky or Ellen are about to go into labor, hopefully not again anytime soon.
Amen.
They'll get this flood of oxytocin in their brain and in their body, and that's what kind of helps them get through all the pain of
my goodness,
the
that's
labor pains.
Yeah.
So I mean, the list goes on and on and on. We could talk about oxytocin all day, but bottom line is it's a very, very interesting, very old molecule that then works in tandem with this other important molecule called vasopressin, or antidiuretic hormone. Basically the same molecule, has two different names, which I really want to talk.
Antidiuretic hormone?
So diarrhea comes into the mix here. So it's an antidiuretic, meaning it holds water in the body. So when vasopressin is pumping, it's holding water in. It functions in the kidneys primarily, but has a bunch of receptors all over the rest of the body, and in the brain. And it's a lot of researchers have called that this like a yin and yang type interaction between oxytocin and vasopressin. And
that is fascinating.
Where it gets really interesting for running is, think about, intuitively when you're running 100-miler, and you were the one that probably first talked to me about this, I think, when we were running Bryce the first time. And you were talking about like, you got to be peeing. Like if you stop peeing, something is going wrong. So like drinking water, but like you should be peeing every hour or something like that. And like the second you notice that stopping, start paying attention to what's going on, and like either drink more water or get your nutrition in control, or salt or something like that. So that I think is a story about antidiuretic hormone and vasopressin, which we should talk about.
That's fascinating. Okay, so if we're running, like there's so many good, when we talk about like, hey, it just feels good to run like these high mileage, like you're going to hell and back, you're going up and down and up and down, like those ups maybe are driven by oxytocin. True or false?
Yeah. Well, so I mean, I was going to kind of frame the whole thing here, at least, and this is just Alex Horn. Sure, I have a PhD, but not
Dr. Alex Horn.
But yeah, Dr. Alex Horn's little take on a lot of this is I think point number one is you mentioned that we kind of evolved to run these 100-milers. I think that actually might not be fully true. I think we evolved to run like 50 milers, maybe 100K. I think we evolved to run through the day for long distances to chase down antelope and kill them. in the heat of the day. Actually, interestingly enough, that's what Dr. Carrier and
Can I pause you right
Lumber run and
there?
stuff. But
I've
yeah, go
mentioned
for it.
this so many times to people, and I think maybe once on the podcast. But your ultra event someday that you're going to put on is going to
Oh
be
yeah, yeah. We're gonna do this together.
chasing an antelope until you
Yeah,
can touch it, because
that's right.
that's what we have evolved as
Involved.
humans.
Yeah,
That's why we've, like, this is what you're saying right now. So we've evolved to
yeah,
move 50 to 100K, 50 miles to 100K, because that's what our meals were doing, that we were trying
yep,
to track down so we could hang with them
yep,
until we tired them out.
yep.
So our event, your event, which I could bring the business side, you could bring the fun, the oxytocin,
Yeah, sure. The
is
spear.
to
No, I
chase.
think there needs to be a blunt spear that you got to run
There
with the
needs to
whole
be a
time,
what?
and you have to be in a
Oh.
loincloth is the other rule. So,
But the goal is to touch it. And so why I
yeah,
called out that event also, because I think that really helps us understand, like, that's why we can go those distances, why we're
yeah.
optimized for those distances, is because it was built out of a necessity. That's what you're saying, right?
As far as we can tell, that was a really good
Yeah.
way to get a high calorie meal, was to chase these antelope or whatever other animals in the savannah down during the heat of the day. And we have this other crazy adaptation of not having any hair on our bodies. And so that allows us to survive the heat a lot better than an antelope that's covered in fur and doesn't have sweat glands like we do. So, so we basically just get them to a point of heat exhaustion, and we're not at heat exhaustion. And then they just fall over. It's not even there's no climax of the whole thing. It's like they're just basically falling over, heat exhaustion. You just go up and stab the thing, and then you eat it. That's what we think.
Wow.
And there are actually tribes out there still doing it. So that's why. So they've been able to observe this in action. But the important thing to note, I think, is that it generally takes them about 50 miles and maybe like 12 hours or something like that.
Okay.
So this idea of running through the night, 100 miles, 24 plus hours, I personally believe we are outside of the normal operating envelope of a human body.
Interesting. Okay.
So not by too much. Like, I think we can do it, as we've
Sure.
all proven. People go run 240 miles, but
Right.
we're in a condition where we need to get creative on how to, even in some ways, like, trick the mind and body into continuing to perform in this, like, fringe environment that we've created for ourselves.
So in 2019, you had me and a handful of other people. You were going to take our blood before the Buffalo 100, or I was 50 milers, what I was going to do that year, maybe. And then COVID came and it slowed you down. But thankfully, Kachina Mosa was still going to happen, a really brutal 100K in Utah County. And you took all of our blood before, and then you took it during, and then you took it after. I think it's interesting. So why did you do that? What was your hypothesis, and what did you learn from that?
Yeah, so we were looking for oxytocin and vasopressin, the two hormones we've talked about. We were actually using you guys as a control, interestingly enough. So as a way of comparing to our main hypothesis, was really which we haven't talked about yet, but how all this relates to post-traumatic stress disorder. So, and I think I remember telling you a little bit about the background there, but ultimately, trying to apply a lot of this evolutionary biology towards something that I thought would be worthwhile and relates to my military experiences. Is all of this stuff, is the social bonding component that oxytocin provides. How does that interact with the, I guess etiology is what they call it, of post-traumatic stress disorder, which is just like all of the signs and symptoms and everything that goes into that. So, so we had a group of post-traumatic stress disorder diagnosed patients that were going through a treatment program that we took blood from, separate from you guys. They had like very severe PTSD, and we took blood from them and analyzed it. We took blood from some police officers that were going through a really intense training course. Get into some of the details on that, but generally just like a boot camp like thing for 5 days. and none of them had PTSD, but they had all been exposed to traumatic experiences. And then the third group was you guys, was the runners, the ultra runners that, and we kind of did it for two reasons. One was I was fundamentally just very curious about what was going on in your bloodstream during a 100-mile or an extreme event like that. But also because, you generally speaking, ultra runners are healthy physiologically, very healthy individuals, which is kind of a good control group. And then originally thinking that ultra runners were also generally psychologically healthy until I did all the interviews and got the data back and came to realize that.
What'd you learn?
Very interesting that there seems to be a selection bias for at least people that, number one, are wanting to run an ultra, and number two, are willing to participate in research that have a history of some either traumatic experiences or just psychological difficulties throughout their lives.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. Yeah. I don't know what was the word you just said, some sort of selection bias, but the people who raised their hand are probably people who have maybe had some stuff in their past that they were eager to, that they've kind of made peace with and were eager to bring to the table with you.
Yeah. Well,
on the other hand, I've never met any healthy individual at a 100-miler. That's for sure.
There you go. I know. So that was just naivete on my part, but yeah, finding that a lot of people I think use ultra running as a kind of as a self-medication for a lot of I think mental struggles like depression or even things like alcoholism or something like that. It's like I think there's a way to go out and whatever it is, the dopamine highs and the things that you get during or the endorphins during an ultra run, I think can help. So that's a whole nother can of worms that we could talk about. But generally, yes, you're right. So we took your blood at a couple different points, and number one, in the end, did exactly what we needed it to do. Is you guys did serve as a pretty useful control to compare your baseline hormone levels to those of these SWAT team members and the PTSD patients, and really found that the hypothesis was that there would be differences, and that I think the idea was that the oxytocin levels in the PTSD patients would be low compared to generally healthy normals, as we call them. And then especially low compared to these police officer SWAT team types that are continuing to perform at a very high level despite the extreme psychological and even trauma of their daily lives. And that was shown to be basically true. So, and which is kind of a novel finding. We're actually finally, so this is 3 years, 3.5 years later now. We finally have a paper in review to publish the actual data. I've published some theory papers on this stuff, but I'll send you the paper once it's done. We focus almost exclusively on the PTSD side of things, but the ultra runners show up as the comparison, which is fun.
So not necessarily being in like a paper submitting version of academia, does that mean you found some conclusions that you're getting peer reviewed, and once peer reviewed, it's sort of like validating? They're looking at your methodology of how you gathered the data, then what your conclusions are, and then they look at it and say, yeah, your conclusions seem to be valid based off of your hypothesis, or something like that. Am I close?
It's the way you went about and did the research. So did you, when you went and did the analysis, did you use the proper protocols? Did you use double blind? Was the guy doing the actual analysis on the assays, the hormones, the assays for the hormones? Was he blind to the conclusions, et cetera? So that's all the peer review process. And I mean, we were confident all along that it was going to make it through into publication. It's just been, balancing all the other job things I do. But also like just trying to make sense of it in a way that I think could be useful to the research community, because some of it is very counterintuitive, actually.
Yeah.
But anyways, but so I think we've got a really nice story. I'm excited to get it
And so
out
that
there.
the conclusion that that paper is offering is that yes, is it as simple as yes, those with PTSD have lower oxytocin than your control group? Is
Yeah,
that the
well,
entirety of the conclusion?
I mean, the name of the paper, I think, is Oxytocin and Vasopressin as biomarkers for severe PTSD.
Okay.
And there is no biomarker for PTSD that exists. Everyone focuses on the common stress hormones like cortisol,
Like the
thinking,
cortisol will
yeah,
act as a proxy.
exactly. Like if you've got certain cortisol levels, maybe you're susceptible to PTSD. But what we
Okay.
found is that really this oxytocin vasopressin kind of yin yang type
Mm-hmm.
relationship that can be detected in blood. It's blood plasma, and so that's, if you think about the neurobiology of it, is the brain, the hypothalamus sending oxytocin or vasopressin to the pituitary gland, which goes straight
Mm-hmm.
into the bloodstream and goes all over the body.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're detecting, is that peripheral, as we call it, the oxytocin in the blood, or
Got it.
vasopressin, and found very interesting. I mean, dramatically different levels of those two hormones between our
Hmm.
three comparison groups. So anyway, so
So
thanks for participating in that.
yeah. Happy to give my blood to science.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if the oxytocin was low, was vasopressin equally normally as high? So they were really out of balance compared to your normal group. So
Yeah, the
was that a
most
problem?
imbalanced were the PTSD patients. So they had very, very high vasopressin levels,
Okay.
and then quite low oxytocin compared to the other groups.
Okay.
The runners tended to have almost like a perfect balance of the two. And
Hmm.
then the SWAT team, interestingly, were reversed, where they had higher oxytocin levels and lower vasopressin levels, which is
Okay.
super interesting to
All
think
right. So
about.
let me bring this into ultra running as an
Yeah.
observation, and that is if oxytocin is this bonding agent, let's
Yeah.
say, I often talk about like how like you find me in the real world out there walking the streets, like I'm you're not going to see me as this warm guy that you want to chat with. But
Sure.
if you find me at like mile 70 or 80 in an ultra, like I am so eager to talk with someone else who's out there doing the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I often, blame it on how much I love the sport and just want to talk to anybody else about the sport. Is there something though to this? Like, is my body like flooded in oxytocin to some degree? And so like, I'm just like, reaching for somebody to,
Yeah. I mean,
I'm bonding in a conversation late in a race.
can't say definitively, and we only took your blood at one point in the race, which I remember
Yeah.
that was a particularly low
It was
point for you.
honestly, of all the
Yeah.
ultras I've ever run, you took my blood right after I encountered a miracle
Yeah.
when I
Oh yeah, that's right.
I timed out of the race. I'd ran out of water and it was so hot. I didn't have water for like 3 hours. And
Yeah.
in the middle of the course, there were these two guys that all of a sudden were
Yeah.
on in a side by side, and they had like 5-gallon jug of cold water,
Yeah.
and they drove me in because I had already timed out. And then he took my blood.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. So, I mean, you were probably, I can imagine your hormone levels were all sorts of messed up because of
Yeah,
being without water for that long, and,
yeah.
unintended. So anyways,
I'm
that
really good at this sport.
that's great. Yeah. So let's talk about how we could both be better at it with all of
Yeah,
this in mind. Because so, I think what framing it in this ultra running paradigm, so we've already said we're kind of for a 100 miler. I think we're moving outside of what maybe our bodies actually evolved to be able to do. We can
yeah.
still do it, and I think the ways we get to that, I think, is by um, trying to dial or tune these hormonal systems in part in our body such that
Hmm.
we can maintain performance for long periods of time. And then this actually kind of can relate to my other job my job of flying airplanes, because something I've learned with that job is if you want to perform anything for a long
Mm-hmm.
period of time, or
Yeah.
perform well for a long period of time on anything, you want to basically keep your stress levels as low as humanly possible. You do not want to activate
Yeah.
your physiological stress response systems at all throughout
Okay.
the process.
I love that. And I'm going to, there's obviously an intuition around what stress is, but just because it's so critical to what you're saying, can you define stress?
Yeah, no, I can't. No, so it's there really is no good definition out there, but the way you can, the way a biologist would define stress is activation of this axis from the brain and the body, so the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. So
Okay.
same parts of the brain, hypothalamus, pituitary, right below it, and then the adrenaline glands that sit on top of the kidneys. That is like your classic stress response, fight or
Okay.
flight or freeze. So that, and that is a cascade that does probably actually involve oxytocin and vasopressin, but more so involves these other hormones, adrenocorticotropin releasing hormone, and then
Sorry, I lost you there.
adrenaline, basically.
I
Oh,
lost you for
okay.
a second, and I don't want to miss it because I reemerged with you laughing, and I think, oh no, did I just leave you hanging on a joke?
Dang it. Okay, what did I last say?
Last I heard you talk about was the adrenal glands sit on top of the kidneys, and then you froze.
Yes. Okay, so the adrenal glands on top of the kidneys. The I said a long biology word, adrenocorticotropin releasing hormone,
Okay.
um, which
Yeah.
is just a stupid word.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the thing that kind of starts this cascade that ultimately ends up in cortisol and adrenaline being
Okay.
released into the bloodstream. And those are the classic stress hormones, and that's like basically think about it as mobilize the body to go fight, flight, or freeze. And that is a short term. So think about it as this is the first thing that evolved a long time ago. Actually, the first one that probably evolved is freeze, interestingly enough. But then it's like this ability to mobilize and fight or flight, to get out of danger. So
Yes.
so think of stress as you feel threatened, you feel in danger, and your body takes over. Your brain, instead of thinking with the bigger parts of your brain, you think with your little reptile brain, the middle, small, old, ancient part of your brain, and you just go into this mode of like, get me out of here as quickly as
reactionary,
possible.
irrational.
Yeah.
Get real rammy. Just want to get
Yeah.
out.
Yeah. And you can imagine probably not a great headspace for
Yeah.
running an ultra.
And so
flying an airplane. Yeah.
Okay. So I was going to say, so the consequence of that is that maybe it tires you out more. You lose focus. Your brain stops working as well. Something in that range. But and you can bring more definition to this question. So if you're on a multi-day mission flying C-17 and you're in a scenario that's, let's say, high stress, and you're having to take off and land a lot, and it's, let's say, across a week. And I know the military has certain regulations on how much time you can actually be in the cockpit and whatever. You're saying in that scenario, the number one tip, which obviously applies to ultra running fairly intuitively, is to reduce those systems becoming active. That big part in your brain, the little part, and then the part on top of your kidneys.
Yeah. Yeah, you want to maintain cortical function is what we call like executive function. So like the part of your brain, the latest part of your brain to evolve, the human part of the brain that can actually think and rationalize and like tell your primitive brain like, nah, we're good, we're gonna keep going. That is so like I think when you go into stress response, like blood flow and like action potentials to that part of your brain just kind of stop. And you end up, you were talking to on one of the other podcasts. Shoot, I forget his name now. We were talking to the guy about nutrition and about
Jesse
how when
Rich.
when you stop getting your brain calories in the late stages of the run, you just I think you're feeding. It's like the cortical parts of your brain are the real calorie intensive parts of the brain, and so you basically lose executive function if you stop getting glucose to that part of the brain, and then you're just stuck with this little reptile brain that has has no intention of running 100 miles. It's like
that the reptile brain really wants to stop.
Yeah.
And that's interesting. Okay, so many places I want to go with that, but for you, let's say you're in that scenario in the Air Force. Do they have regulations on calorie intake?
No, not really. So we have rules on how long we can operate.
Okay.
And actually one of the prototype projects, technology projects I've been working on is trying to figure out how we can extend operating duration for C-17 pilots, other mobility pilots, so that we can get further distances in the Pacific, actually, for
Whoa.
potential issue with China. So
Okay.
that's kind of where we're going right now, is how far can we push the human body in terms of endurance?
Amazing.
Now, that's not running endurance. This is
Sure.
like cognitive performance, like not falling asleep while you're trying to land an airplane,
Yeah,
stuff
I mean,
like
but
that.
there's
Yeah.
elements of the will involved, which absolutely transfers to ultra running. And let's just also name that ultra running, using your research and applying it to ultra running, is quite inferior to to what you're actually applying it to. But if I were to bring it into ultra running, I mean, you still have to. It's still a function of the will. That's for
Mm-hmm.
sure. Like deciding
Yes.
to keep going.
Yeah.
Whereas
And
in your
and not
scenario,
yeah.
it's a little bit, the implications are a little bit bigger.
Sure. But you're right. It's all kind of the same mechanism, and you don't want to fall asleep. You don't want to fall asleep while you're ultra running. Actually, speaking of DNFs, because this is the DFL before DNF
Yeah. Speaking of DNFs,
podcast.
you're talking to the Courtney Dowalter of DNFs here.
I love that. That my DNF at Bryce, if you remember that one, when we ran part of that one
I
together.
can't
But
believe you made it to 80.
yeah, it was like 82 or 84 or something.
Yeah.
I ended up DNFing. So that was when, Colby Carper, bless his soul, ran with me through the night.
You
And we
didn't do
were,
it, but you should have done air quotes on ran.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think we were moving at like 30-minute miles or something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was great. But he got to Sunrise with me and everything. And
Mm-hmm.
then he wasn't in a position to be able to go any further. So then I thought, I pooped, which I wanted to talk about that too.
That was
So
actually, I'm not kidding. That's one of
yeah,
the things that I wanted to call out about how, like at the Buffalo 100, how you were able to do that just in the field. I so admire it.
you got to figure that one out. That is one of the most, I think, interesting ways to hack this
Okay.
biological process we're talking about. So interestingly enough, the anal sphincters are connected to the vagus nerve, which actually is part of the
De-stressing.
de-stressing process. So you poop and it literally de-stresses your body. And gives you this like feeling of euphoria and calm. And so Colby and I
Whoa.
pooped in the woods, and I got like he said I came out like a wild animal. Like I was so pumped, so excited about everything, and we ran like an 8-minute mile for like 3 miles or something like
Wow.
that. So anyways, pooping is another
Okay. I'm
trick.
glad you called that out. And
Yeah.
I'm also equally as impressed, proud, thankful that we were both wanted to talk about that today.
Yes. Yeah. Hopefully everyone benefits from that part of the conversation. But anyways, back to the DNF story was, I think from there I had a good 5 miles, and then I started working my way up the mountain again on my own, and I was falling asleep on the trail, like just like kind of drifting off and whatever. And I think ultimately just realized it was a function of probably fatigue, and just like I think I actually, why that's my favorite race to date so far, is I think I actually did find the actual limit of my own physiology. That like it was, I was like, I actually, if I keep going past mile, I think it was 84, I
Yeah.
might just fall off the mountain, and I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Because there were some steep sections coming up, and so I think
Yeah.
that's when I was like, all right, here we are at the edge of
Yeah. You had at
of
that
my
point, you had
performance.
a son that was maybe 3 years old and then probably an infant
Yeah, I
close
think
to it.
yeah. And I didn't train.
Well, that was
I never
2020.
trained very well. Yeah, Summer was no. I think that was 2019. I don't think Summer was born yet. I think Ellen was like 8 months pregnant or
Oh,
something.
I clearly remember the day because it was post COVID.
Yeah.
We were in middle of COVID. It was the George Floyd day that the
Oh,
riots
you're
started.
right. You're right. Okay, so I had a 1-year-old.
Yeah, that's why that was so clear. Cause I was, I backed out early on that one. Wasn't feeling it that day.
Right.
Was not even close to well trained. And so I was laying in your sprinter and the news started flooding in. It was like, yeah. So that I know for sure it was like end of May.
Interesting.
Of 20.
You're right. Yeah, you're right. So I mean, similarly, I think I was building my sprinter in the months leading up to the race. So I wasn't training very well. But that's what I like. I mean, that's actually why I like, personally, why I do ultras, is I'm most interested in just finding that limit. And that's why I think I've always told you, I'm like, DNFs are admirable. You know, it's like, especially if you've learned something about yourself through the process, which I think you probably have every single step of the way. So
I love that part of it. Yeah. What I'm taking into Zion, of which you'll be at that starting line with me. Jeremy Cox will be there. Ryan, who interviewed last week. What I'm trying different this time is like this mentality that a handful of people have talked to me about. And that is, this one guy, Bear, put it most succinctly. And that's, like when you go to the store and you buy junk food and you put it in your pantry at home, now you're tempted. And so if you're tempted and there's a bag of Doritos in there, you're going to eat them. So you brought them home. So this time I'm not even going to bring quit to the race. Like I'm not going to put it in the pantry. I've never had that approach because I'm comfortable, like, because of all of the stuff that you're talking about, finding the end of myself. Like me too, that like as a learner, I just love that. But this one is about finishing at all costs. And I've never had that mentality. And so that's what this whole podcast has been about, is like at all costs.
Nice.
Most
no, and I mean, I know for a fact that you are capable of that. You've done it before. It seems like you've been training well. And then I think the fact, what I've seen you most successful when you have a good crew, a good support crew. And that I think is, again, I think it's a story of oxytocin to a certain extent.
That's a great point.
But I think when you have that like team mentality, you're a little coalition of people going out and achieving a big objective. And sure, you're the one at the center of it, but everybody else is contributing to that.
That is so really interesting important to think about. So coming into the aid station, the one that I finished that year in 2018, I mean, like I remember mile 90, there was like 14 people there that were there to support me. So you're saying biologically that may increase oxytocin.
Yeah, and just keep your body in a state of calm, because I think that this is something I learned throughout my career. I got to
remember that. That's so good.
Yeah, the surest way to make a human stressed is to isolate them. So that's actually like the way we do. It's really sad, actually, and I think they're going to stop this kind of research soon. But one of the ways we do research on all of these stress things is you put rats in severe isolation for like their entire, and they're just rats, they're not even humans that evolved to be like extremely social. And that activates these stress responses more than anything. So if you feel alone, isolated, left out, whatever, that's the surest way to get someone. And then this goes into the PTSD conversation. Like that was kind of the broader hypothesis about PTSD, is I think it's a function of social bonding and social isolation. And so people that feel either abandoned or, imagine all the guys. I'd love to talk to your Green Beret buddy about this, but like, you have this team, your Green Beret team, your Navy SEAL team, your C-17 air crew, whatever it is. And then you separate from active duty, you redeploy, heading back home, whatever it is. And now you feel so isolated and alone that all of those symptoms just emerge, and your body gets to this state of hyperarousal and fear and stress and danger and all that stuff.
Interesting way to think about this. Like so oxytocin, one of its functions is to keep your body calm.
Yep. And
so what you're saying as a pilot, your goal is to reduce stress. So one way that we reduce stress, oxytocin is a means of reducing stress.
It's a mechanism for that. I think it's a mechanism for that. Yeah.
Interesting. And so then having a crew, bringing this back to, pedestrian terms of ultra running, where having a crew could be just this moment that spikes that for you. Now, in that moment though, when you get that spike, if you say it's the yin and yang, the vasopressin, was that what it's called?
Vasopressin, yeah.
If that goes up, is there any negative impacts of that when you have an oxytocin spike?
No, yeah, I mean, I think it's in this context. I mean, again, we don't know for sure. There may be people listening out there that have seen the opposite in their research or whatever, but it's generally like they kind of move in this kind of way. So like one goes up, the other goes down, the other. Sometimes they go up together, sometimes they go down together in certain contexts. But I think in this one, what we're talking about is like you're really just trying to keep vasopressin down because number one, you want to be peeing, so antidiuretic hormone.
Gosh, this is so interesting. It's so interesting when you bring back something else in that's like, oh, this is all making so much sense, but I'm still trying to put the cohesive puzzle together in my brain. So yeah, the vasopressin stays down. We're allowed to pee still. It goes up. We can't pee anymore.
You hold in all of your pee.
And is that like a survival mechanism? It's like I'm going to keep everything in because there's so much stress.
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So peeing is a manifestation of reduced stress to some degree, so long as you're drinking enough water. Because sometimes I drink so much water it just never comes out, and maybe then we're saying possibly stressed. So we want that to go down.
Yep.
Peeing is a manifestation of it. Seeing people, the oxytocin goes up, so we're getting this bonding. We're getting all these good things that help us keep going, or at least thinking clearly.
Yeah, having a good friend you meet on the trail and just sitting there chatting. Those are some in my I haven't been doing a ton of races lately, but last year I did the Golden Gate Ultra. It was 100K with a ton of elevation. It was super fun. Nice. But I was suffering at about mile 40, like thought I was just done, like the bonk of all bonks. And then this like wonderful 64-year-old gentleman just like trots up next to me. I think noticed I was suffering and just started talking to me. And we just started chatting. And sure enough, like, I just felt like this rejuvenation happening, and we started, and then at some point we started running together. So that I think was a story of that. Like I kind of was able to shift, like just think about it as your body's shifting between these different states, and you're trying to keep it in the state of calm, relaxation, safety, and that's the way you're going to be able to. I think a really big one. You think of the thing that causes DNFs more than anything is gut shutdown, right?
Okay.
That's what I know for a lot of people. That's like they're just like, I couldn't even eat if I want, or every time I put anything in my body, I'd throw it up.
Yeah.
And then you're just like, you're done. Like there's no way you're going anywhere if you can't take calories. And that is a story of just like total extreme stress. And so you need to keep from getting into that state by, I think, holding yourself in this like, nope, everything's okay. We're safe. We're happy. We're calm. We're doing good. We're just running a casual 100 miles.
Okay. Yeah. I have to pee so bad, but I'm going to go do that real quick, sign. And I'm going to come back and I'm going to tell you something I haven't said out loud yet, and I need your take on it. So give me just a sec. Okay, so I have another thing I'm trying to deal with here in this race, and I haven't said this out loud, but it's probably good I say it out loud so I can see if this is the time and place to deal with this other thing. And that's I'm terrified of the night, and I'm terrified of the dark. And so I'm trying to face that fear as well. And so I don't want to pace her overnight.
Why? Because you want an excuse to quit?
No. In fact, the opposite. I want to conquer that fear. So I was horrified of snakes, like horrified of snakes. And then I started to do really intentional things. Like, I mean, I tell you, it was an irrational fear, but I would go to the zoo and I would just stand near the snakes and just watch. Or, I mean, first I had to watch them on TV and like be able to just look at them and consciously think they're on TV. They're not going to get me. Then I went to the zoo where I was near them, but there was lots of stuff in between. And now when I see them on the trails, I saw them on the trail. I used to literally, I'd probably cry. Now I see them, no big deal. I'll stop and get photos. Like but I had to work through it over the course of like 8 years. One time I tried to hold a snake because I was trying to get over this fear because I never liked this fear. I tried to hold it. It was a docile like python family pet, and it touched me with its head, and I passed out. So,
I mean, I don't like snakes either.
But that said, one of my final frontiers of irrational fears that I can face, like you know, I've got these irrational fears that my kids are going to die, you know, things like that. But I don't, but of my phobias that I can do work on, one of them is being terrified of the dark and the night. And so this race, I was thinking I also wanted to fold that in. Maybe this is the time for it, maybe it's not, but I'm just throwing, I guess I'm just throwing it out there.
That was my thought is maybe do that next one once you get another belt buckle.
That might be. I've had a few people say, "Hey, do you have pacers? Do you need pacers? Do you need pacers?" And I haven't been able to respond. I just kind of freeze because I'm thinking, am I going to deal with my darkness issue?
Well, you may be forced to have a pacer if I don't drop out early.
Well, to me, what the dream is so. If I can pull it together, I want to do a podcast with me, you, Ryan, and Jeremy, where we just talk race strategy, so they can see what, you know, four dopey, crappy runners,
exactly,
how we strategize around our races. But you know, like there's this thing of like, hey, I want to run with you the whole time, but there's also got to be this permission to be like, hey, when you feel good, you go, and I need to feel free that I can go if I feel good, and we'll yo-yo for a little bit, but maybe you feel good the whole time and we don't see each other. I do think a fun scenario is that we're still together late in the race, but I'm not going to put pressure on it.
No, yeah, there doesn't need to be any pressure on it, but I do remember it not working out very well for us on
at Bryce.
Yeah, when we just kind of peeled off.
But man, Buffalo 100 was awesome. This like 70 miles, right?
Yeah, that was fun. And I think, I mean, we could talk about that one. That was an interesting one where we. If I recall, we were both basically like egging each other on at like mile 65 or whatever going into that. I forget where you dropped. It was like 70 or something.
70.
We were both basically being like, "Yep, we're quitting. Like we're done. This is stupid. We're falling asleep."
Actually, this is perfect. This is the perfect snapshot moment. I was underdressed for the event. That was a cold night.
Yeah,
and then I'm coming out. I'm like, I think I'm done. And so were you. And then we get there and you didn't. So take me into that. This is how we land the plane here on this episode. In that moment when we're like, all right, let's call it. I'm going, I'm like, I think we're both done. And then Matt Bergstrom comes and says, Alex is going to keep going. And I'm like, I don't feel betrayed, but I don't not feel betrayed. How come he's not quitting? So how did you keep going?
Like I went back on my word. I'm not a man of my word.
Yeah, you're so I love it, and I'm so happy that you got the finish. But how did you keep going?
Yeah, so I do think I was genuinely committed to quitting with you.
Yeah,
as a team effort, and then
I can have that impact on somebody.
Yeah, we got there, and so I think what it comes down to for me is maybe the difference of what I'm in it for. I don't know exactly what you're in it for, or what you were in that one for, but I've heard others talk about even on your podcast or on the YouTube episodes, but that like I hear common mentality is I just wanted it, so I wanted the finish line so bad. I just wanted that belt buckle so bad, and that got me through. And that's never resonated with me. I actually I really don't care that much about the finish line. I am more so in it for this like mystical spiritual experience of like there's no other way you can get to that state of mind without taking drugs, which is an interesting way of doing it. But this is one of the few other ways you can actually get to these like very strange landscapes of the human experience.
Absolutely.
And I love dabbling in that from time to time. So, so for me, it's a bit like a walkabout every couple of years. I'm like, I want to go and see what there is to find.
See who I am now. Like that person that doesn't come out. Like Ali Kolaski, a friend of Borderlands, talks about. Like there's you meet somebody at mile 60 and 70 that you've never met before. Now since we've been there, we have met that person before, but I also think that person changes. It's also growing up, but it is also a completely different person. And maybe it sounds like now to those who don't run ultras, it does sound like I'm talking about psychedelics.
Yeah. Or that we're schizophrenic or something.
Which could be.
We kind of maybe are.
but so I think we meet somebody new out there.
You do, and it's always an interesting encounter for sure. And so I think I sat there, I got a cup of coffee, and then I think I saw like the glow on the horizon of like the sun was getting ready to come up
Yeah, it was.
or
Yeah.
something, and I was like, I just want to see what it's like at sunrise. So it was just like that seemed to be an
Mm,
important part of the experience for me. So I was like, I'm just going to go out there and I'm going to run a little bit more. The sun's going to rise. I'm going to enjoy that moment or not enjoy the moment or whatever. And then I'll see what the rest of the race holds. So for me, it just felt like I wasn't quite done. I didn't think, to be honest, when I left that aid station, I still didn't think I was going to finish the race.
mm-hmm.
But I was like, eh, I'll make it to the next aid station. I'll get the sunrise. That'll be an important part of the experience.
Yeah.
And then I just kind of kept rolling with it, and I was
Phew.
hallucinating, and Ellen and the kids, or Ellen and Bo, showed up at mile 88, I think,
Mm-hmm.
and that was a huge. I mean, talk about oxytocin. It's
Yeah.
like I remember weeping rolling into that
Mm.
aid station, seeing them, seeing
Yeah.
Bo,
Yeah.
like it was such a powerful emotional experience. And
Mm.
then I was like, okay, I think I got this now. So,
Wow.
um, but yeah, I
So,
think that was maybe the difference or something.
all right. So one question, and I want two different people to answer. I want Alex, just the runner, the everyday fella, and
Yeah.
then the evolutionary biologist. Um, Seeing that sunrise, it's coming up, so that motivated you. What was it as a runner in the sunrise? Why was that intriguing to you? What did that speak something to you? Did that say, "Hey, I've been running for 24 hours," or even plus or minus? Like, what did that speak to you?
Um, I'm a sucker for like good views,
Mm.
or like just like pretty things to, I don't know, whatever. So I think like something about that appealed to me is like, I think I want to see what this view of the sun coming up over the or right, yeah, they come up right over the Wasatch Mountains,
That's
and you
right.
get
Yep.
it's just fantastic out there on Antelope Island. So like
Yeah.
that kind of drew me in, and I was
Hmm.
just a sucker for that, I think. And then I think, yeah, like the getting through the night felt like some sort of accomplishment, and I just said like I'm not in it for the accomplishment, but still like
Yeah.
something of that was intriguing to be like, okay, I ran through the night, like I made it
Mm-hmm.
through the night, and then I'll quit or something like that.
Yeah.
But so I think as a runner that it was that, but then switching over to the biology part is, yeah. So I mean, and I've experienced this a lot flying C-17s. And I think we talked about it on the during Buffalo, in all the many hours we were just sitting there chatting, trotting along at a painfully slow pace. Is that being just the nature of my job as a C-17 pilot? I've done a lot of flying through the night, staying up for
Mm-hmm.
24, 36 hours at a time,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of doing these like performance for a generally longer period of time than most people. Like doctors are
Yeah.
the kings of this, like your
Sure.
surgeons, like they do that shit all the time.
Yeah.
But long haul pilots do it too. So I had some experience with that, and I think that helped a lot of like knowing what it's like, because when I'm flying over the ocean and you're just dragging and you're just like nodding off and
Yeah.
bored out of your mind, and then the sun starts coming up and the rays of sunlight hit your face and go into your eyes and go hit your,
Mm.
it's another long word, the suprachiasmatic nucleus of the hypothalamus, that
Mm-hmm.
captures that input and then
Hmm.
starts to tune your body clock to be like, it's daytime. Let's get the juices
Oh,
flowing.
let's fire the
So
things that fire when it's
let's,
daytime
yeah,
on your
let's,
body.
exactly. And that happened for sure. Is like so that's another like tip, is
Hmm.
like if you're really close to making it to sunrise, just try making it to sunrise, because you're going to experience a whole biological change to the way you're moving around. It may not last too long. And that happens too, is like you may get this surge and then your body's like, nah, but we're still done, whatever, and
Yeah.
that's fine. But
Hmm.
give it that chance to like get the rays of sunlight, do something with that.
Yeah.
So that's another thought.
Nice. What
Yep.
shoes are you gonna wear?
I've got the Ultra, the Mont Blancs with the
Oh,
little
nice.
boa. I'm
Oh,
super stoked about
I
those. It's
love the
been
BOA
really fun.
system. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
So
awesome.
so I mean, I've been, yeah, it's like tighten, loosen, all that good stuff. So
Yeah,
I think I have way too many miles on these shoes, but I'm just
yeah.
gonna go for it. Hope
I've
for the
got
best.
I've got almost 600 miles on the shoes I'm in right now. That's the
Yeah.
Merrell Agility Peak Fives, and
Oh yeah.
there's no end in sight on them. They are still so good. I'm so stinging
Nice.
happy with them. Though I am going to get a new pair before. I just can't believe I'm
Yeah.
600 miles in, and they still got all the
Have,
spring that I would have wanted. But
yeah, that's good. Yeah,
all
I'm
right,
all about the wide toe box of those
yeah,
guys. But yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Well,
Anyways,
Doctor, pilot, captain, what are you a captain? What are you?
oh, major is the rank if you care to
Major
know.
Doctor.
Yeah.
All right, Major Doctor Horn. This was fun.
Yeah.
I can't wait for Zion. Hopefully we talk again before, but if not,
Yeah.
we'll check in once we all arrive at the
Yeah.
Airbnb and kick this thing off.
Yeah. Let's do a brainstorming sesh for how to actually a bunch of hooligans make it through,
I know.
who have not trained nearly enough.
Yeah, I was about to ask.
Just to
Final
help us.
question. How's
Yeah.
your training?
It's not great.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I'm putting in maybe 25 miles a week if I'm lucky. But in
you'll
the
be
past, I mean, I've made it through with that. Like I
you'll
said,
be
it's
fine.
it's all about the experience. So
Well, this is great. Okay.
yeah.
Thank you.
All right.
We'll do this again. See you soon.
Yep. All right.
Bye.